Hi, everyone. It was an all too familiar scene played out in two totally different countries about what seemed to be two totally different issues, if you ask the pundits. And at the same time, the reaction seems similar, yet remarkably different at the same time. Last weekend, our beloved Jewish people, both in Eretz Israel and throughout the Golah, was again launched into intense mourning when it became apparent that six more hostages were murdered by savage terrorists at the end of a horrifying 330 days in captivity, apparently just as the murderers started to feel the heat of the army on their heels. Hitting close to home, insofar as one of the victims was Hirsch Goldberg Poland, whose parents became household faces around the world, our people were particularly hurt with the tragic fate these precious Kedoshim faced. And yet at the same time, a tragic school shooting in Georgia, where four students were killed by the gun of a 14-year-old who was already on a government watch list, brought home the fear so many of us face as we try to live lives with as much balance and safety in our routine, despite the chaos and the confusion in the greater community, country, and world. Who would have thought that we would need to be fearful of such a simply daily aspect of life as sending our children off to school? It's bizarre and it's scary. It's the sum total of our takeaway that we need to live with sadness and fear because, frankly, the world is not a safe place. What are we supposed to think about? And what are we supposed to gain? Our Parsha might offer some insight and some solid food for thought. You see, towards the end of the Parsha, we learn about a murder that happened between two cities where the murderer is not identified. The elders come from Yerushalayim to measure the distance between the two cities and the victim. The closer city then goes out and performs the Eglah Rufa ceremony, where a young calf is brought to Nachal Eitan, an area in a valley that's barren. The Zakenim wash their hands and place their hands on the calf and declare that their hands didn't spill the blood of the victims and they didn't see the murder happen. The calf is then decapitated and pushed into the valley. The Kohanim present ask Hashem for kapara, for atonement for the nation, and that the blood should be atoned. The Gemara notes that the whole ceremony is strange. Why do we bring a calf into a valley? And so the Talmud explains that it's as if Hashem was telling the people to bring something that wasn't able to bring fruit and be decapitated in a place where vegetation, fruit can't be created, and that it should then be able to atone for he who was also not given a place and a chance to reproduce. And so the Torah assumes that there is a need for everyone, lechaper, to atone here because of the murder of a single individual by a single individual. Why? And why is the decapitating of a calf supposed to bring that atonement? It seems voodooistic, if you ask me. Why would the symbolic decapitation of an uninvolved calf atone for a murder when the murderer can't be found? And why do we need atonement for an entire nation in the first place? It just seems absurd. Well, I'm at it. What's up with all this hand washing prior to the mitzvah? I believe the answer comes down to three letters. They don't read well together and probably should never be pronounced when we are dealing with murder or any other sin. The letters are N, M, and P. NMP, or not my problem, is a phrase and a movement that humanity sometimes employs to wash its hands from a responsibility over a situation. While we might not always have solutions for all of society's challenges, it is a difficult pill to state that something in my midst is not my problem. If we live in and accept a society where evil is allowed to proceed unchecked, and murder and attempted murder is okay, as long as it's of the other people, and we're living an NMP life, and we need kapara. In fact, there's a difference of opinion between the Bavli and the Yerushalmi, the Babylonian and Jerusalem Talmuds, as to whom the people address when they state that their eyes didn't see. While the Bavli notes that the atonement is for not taking care of the victim, the Yerushalmi comes along and says that the intended is the murderer, because as Rav Hirsch explains, in our society, no one should be left to have to live a life of crime. And if there is tolerance for crime, either for the victim or for the perpetrator, then the society too needs to atone for not caring about its makeup. Baruch Mordechai Ezrachi in Parshas Vayigash explains that if no one in a society takes responsibility for the ills of society, then everyone in the society is to blame. No one in such a society can ever properly declare NMP, it's not my problem. Everyone must atone. Moreover, Ibn Ezra notes that it's not just the tolerance of evil and the turning of a blind eye or an accusing one that leads to an Eglah Rufa situation. Rather, he explains, had society not engaged in similar indifference to human dignity and life, there would be no Eglah Rufa to be brought, because the murder, frankly, just wouldn't have happened. Rabbi Yosef Shalom Elyashiv notes that this is precisely the message to be learned from the sad episode of Pilegish Begiva that occurred after the death of Yoshua. As the story is told in Sefer Shoftim, there was a terrible murder that occurred in the section of Binyamin. And in response to outrage, a civil war broke out among the Jewish nation as the other tribes united against Binyamin. 72,000 people from Binyamin died at that time, and people were not allowed to reproduce with them. Rabbi Yashiv notes the comments of the Yalkut Shimoni that faults the leadership, that faults the absolute leadership which had been appointed by none other than the Beis Din of Yoshua and Pinchas, who could have simply prevented the entire episode by tying their laces and traveling from city to city to teach people Derech Eretz. However, upon entering the land of Israel, everyone, the leadership and the lay, busied themselves with their own lives and their own issues. They washed their hands of communal and neighborly responsibilities. And thus, when they learned of the precipitating event of the war, they were busy pointing fingers at the people of Binyamin. But it was a point in time and a point with the finger in the wrong direction. It frankly was too late. The Jew must make it his or her business to see to it that every member of our nation and society has the ability to produce payros, to produce fruits. And if we do not, then we too need to have a kapara. Why a kapara? Rabbeinu Bechaya knows that the word kaper or kapara doesn't only refer to atonement, it refers to an uncovering. For in order to achieve any degree of kapara, one must first be vulnerable to discovering his or her involvement and culpability in any calamity befalling the world and choosing to do something about it. Perhaps that's the message that John Poland offered when he utilized his beloved son Hirsch, Hashem Yinkom Damo. We failed you, John said. We all failed you. The pointing of blame was not there. Unlike the media and the political pundits who look at the other to find fault when we're all running scared after a tragedy like the one that occurred in Georgia this week, this huge pillar of Emunah, John, took it upon himself at his rawest moment to recognize that we all of Klal Yisrael, I dare say all of humanity, need to look inside and see the shortcomings that each of us might have. Perhaps in our language and focus politically, perhaps in our rhetoric, definitely in our arivut, in our care for our fellow Jews and humanity, that led to careless, senseless death. When we are in a society that allows death and wrong to exist, in its leadership or in its prevalence, we might not be able to change it immediately, but we can certainly make sure to never allow ourselves to say, it wasn't me or NMP. We must say and do whatever we can to eradicate evil from our midst. Our efforts driven by the memory of those holy neshamos thereafter will definitely bear fruit. The Eglah Rufa process involves washing hands on top of the calf. While many others wash their hands to remove dirt from their midst, a Jew is always careful to use a hand wash to raise himself up and to create kedusha. When we wash our hands, we're not engaging in removal from a bad situation. We're washing our hands to lean in and up and to raise ourselves and society as a whole to a stronger, better place. And may God give us that ability to appreciate that stronger, better place. May He give us the ability to always say, whatever is going on in the world, it is about me. And that's something I can do about it. Wishing you and yours a Shabbat Shalom and a Shabbat Shalom to all.